Hi there, I'm Kate McClellan, and I've been a professional wedding planner for over 20 years now. I started Planning Collective when I noticed that though most couples are super excited about getting engaged, they quickly feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the actual process of planning their weddings. If left unchecked, this can lead to massive burnout and the urge to scrap all your plans and just elope. While this is totally normal, you don't have to sacrifice your sanity for your dream wedding. In the Wedding Planning Collective podcast, I'm going to share the processes, tips, and tools that all engaged couples like you need to feel confident, supported, and excited about your wedding plans again. Let's get started. Hey there, before we get to the episode, I have a quick question for you. Have you been unsuccessfully trying to shake that feeling that you're forgetting something when it comes to your wedding? You've got the Knot app and you've downloaded countless other planning checklists, but you just can't get rid of that sneaking suspicion that there's something you don't know yet. It's a very common feeling when it comes to wedding planning. So much so that I decided to put together a free resource to help get rid of what I call FOWO, the fear of wedding oversight. Yes, it does include that 12-month task checklist, but that's just the start. In addition to the ultimate wedding planning checklist, my new Don't Forget list also includes a wedding vendor checklist, your shopping list, a packing list for the wedding weekend, and a complete wedding item setup list to make sure that you are truly not forgetting anything when it comes to your wedding. And you heard me right, this list is free for you to grab right now. Just head over to planningcollective.com/forgetting and it's all yours. That's planningcollective.com/FORGETTING, and let's get rid of that FOWO together. All right, let's get on to the episode. Hey guys, Kate here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wedding Planning Collective podcast. Today, we are pulling out the metaphorical crystal ball and we're looking ahead for what's trending in weddings for 2026 and 2027. And we're going to talk more than just colors. These are the real design shifts and ideas that are actually shaping how weddings are going to look and feel over the next few years. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how you can use these trends without losing your mind or your budget. Let's get started. Trend number one is unique layouts, more specifically serpentine tables or open flow designs. The buzzword of the moment is definitely serpentine. You're going to see it everywhere if you haven't already. And what that usually refers to is a serpentine table. So those are the long winding tables that kind of have like a snake or an S type shape to them. Sometimes it's more linear, so it's essentially a straight line, but a crooked straight line, if that makes sense. And sometimes it's more dramatic, making more of a curved shape. I've seen several places suggest that this shape creates more of an open or social flow for your guests. And that's great in theory. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And I've certainly seen so many gorgeous images of receptions with serpentine tables. And what I'm really loving is that we're seeing some ceremony aisles actually taking a serpentine shape now. And I think it looks gorgeous. But of course, I am here to talk about the reality of these looks, not necessarily just how gorgeous it looks on Pinterest, because it looks simple, right? When you look at these gorgeous images of these winding tables, winding aisles, it looks stunning. But the logistics or the reality can be a little bit trickier. First off, not every venue or layout can handle that. The curved tables take up a lot more space within the layout. And more importantly, most venues don't own those serpentine tables. Or if they do, they might have one or two that they use for buffets or something like that, but they likely won't have enough to create the look that you're seeing in these images. The curved nature of the tables looks super open and whimsical, but it does require a little extra work on your end to make sure that the spacing and seating will work, as you're not going to be able to have the traditional even sides on both sides. Depending on how dramatic the curve is of your tables, sometimes the seating can put guests almost with their backs to each other. So it can be kind of tricky to figure out the logistics of how that is going to work. Not to say it's not possible, but again, usually when you see those gorgeous images, there is another side to it. And before you jump on renting all of these tables, I want you to think through the logistics of it. If that feels really overwhelming to think of how you're going to do these serpentine tables throughout your entire reception, this is the perfect opportunity for you to pick like one focus moment. So maybe your head table, or you can do a sweetheart table in the middle of two serpentine tables on the side that are for your family. And let that be the statement of the room without having to worry about how you're going to do the logistics of the entire reception. And same goes for the ceremony serpentine winding aisles. Love the look. I love it so much. Keep in mind, you likely aren't going to see the impact of this unless you have a drone that's taking pictures above your ceremony. So as much as I love the look of it, remember, as you're looking down the aisle, you want to make sure it's dramatic enough so it looks like a pattern and not just like somebody messed up the aisle and it's crooked, right? So thinking of the logistics of these different things can be tricky, but with enough time and ideally you have a planner working with you to help you with these layouts, it can be gorgeous. My final tip when it comes to either serpentine tables or the winding aisles is to make sure you're keeping your florist and design team in the loop on this, as it can really impact the way they design the centerpieces or the aisle flowers. First of all, it greatly increases the surface space, of course, so they want to make sure that they have enough product, but it can also really impact what they're able to do. You're likely not going to have one stationary centerpiece like you would on a round table if you're doing serpentines. So make sure that you're keeping them in the loop on these plans. Again, I really do love this look and I'm excited to see it come into more and more events, but just make sure that you're aware it does take a little bit more legwork on your end to pull it off. Trend number 2, bold and layered color combinations. Over the past few years, we've been seeing color creep back in to that classic greenery and white color palette that was all over the place for so long. 2026 and 2027 are set to make it official. Bold color is definitely here to stay. And not just bold colors, but bold color combinations. Cobalt blue and marigold yellows, dusty purples, even a touch of neon. And we're not just talking about like the neon signs, but neon in the floral or in the stationery, bright colors, and thinking about layering these. But it's not just about picking one or two bright colors. It's about layering them within your design. So pairing rich jewel tones with earthy neutrals, or muted pastels with deep, like moody hues, things that you can like feel when you're looking at it. Pulling all this together in the same color palette is where we're really going to see this transforming weddings. Where we're really going to see this shine is in texture and pattern. So velvet linens with hand-dyed silk napkins, monochrome ceramic plates with a really beautiful pattern charger underneath. You can combine florals that mix really delicate blooms with harsher branches or berries to give you a little bit more dimension. And of course, even stationery is getting in the mix, and it's a perfect way to incorporate these layers into your wedding design. Whether it's simply mixing up the color of the cardstock you're using, different textures like embossed or letterpress, and creating a unique edge to the different prints. Those are all great ways that you can make your stationery feel more like art than just a menu. The key is going to be getting that depth, the layers of color, textures, and patterns that you really want to feel intentional and not just totally chaotic. So how do you do that? That's the trickiest thing, right? You see all of these things in a showroom, and how do you make that a reality? Or how do you know how that's all going to look together? Start with a base. So usually this is going to be a color or a pattern, something that gives you the inspiration that you're basing this palette around. It could be different for everybody. Some start with a table linen they absolutely love. Maybe while you're at a rental showroom, you see a plate that is just to die for, or a charger that you really want to incorporate. So start with that base, and then you start adding things around it. Don't feel like you magically have to have this vision of how everything's going to come together right off the bat. Sometimes it can take months to really fine tune these layers. That is something that I think when you see these things in Pinterest or inspirational magazines and styled shoots, it feels like it's just this easy creation that came together. And for some that are in the industry, it might be easier for them to pull it together, but don't feel like you have to have it nailed right off the bat. So again, start with whatever that base is for you, whatever that favorite thing is, and then you start adding in some of the other accents, different colors, different textures, bringing in different components to add in that layer of depth. Remember, it's not just linens. It, of course, can be the linens. It can be the flatware, the glassware. There's so many gorgeous colors of goblets that you can add into the mix. Use the fabrics to your benefit for napkins, the florals, of course, and the stationery products, like I mentioned before. Those can be great ways to add in some more texture in unique ways. And don't forget the lighting. Of course, amber is the most common color that we use for uplighting around a room. But if you're adding in some of these layers, you might want to talk to your planner about how you can incorporate different colors into the mix without it feeling like a nightclub. One final tip here is when you can, always try to test these different color combinations and details together. So just like the serpentine tables, bringing this trend in might involve a few extra steps. Most likely, you're going to have multiple different vendors that are helping to contribute to these really layered looks. If you can, set an appointment at one of their showrooms and bring in the different components so you can kind of get a visual of how it's going to all look on one table. It's not going to be exactly like the wedding will be. You likely won't have the florals the same. You won't be able to duplicate the lighting. You are going to have to kind of trust your gut or trust your planner's gut a little bit on this, but at least you can see it together. There are times where we've done this and it's been just a like, oh, I don't like how this works. So it's important to see that in advance, especially as you're getting more creative with how these are coming together. So it's going to take a few extra steps likely, but it can have a huge payoff in the end. Couples are playing with layering colors. They're also embracing more fabric into the design, which brings us to our next trend, which is textiles and draping that are being more of the focal point. Of course, table linens are going to be probably the first thing people think about when we're talking about fabrics. But we can also incorporate the fabric into other things like overlays. So you can have your base table linen and you can bring an embroidered table overlay or a runner, velvet runners, again, bringing in the different textures and colors, pleated chair ties. Of course, napkins are a great point to bring in different fabrics. But most importantly, different textures for your napkin are becoming more and more part of the design element and not just an afterthought. But a lot of what we're seeing now is creativity with draping. We used to think about pipe and draping as a necessity for some venues to either hide ugly walls, hide the catering team. So if you have a prep spot where the catering's setting up their temporary kitchen, usually you don't want your guests to see that. So we add pipe and drape to separate that space. Maybe you have one large space and you need pipe and drape to separate the ceremony from the reception. That's typically how we've looked at pipe and drape over the past couple of decades, but now it is becoming the showstopper on its own. Incorporating fabric and draping, so whether we're talking about against like a flat wall with bringing different colors and different strands of fabric together, or even hanging from ceiling installations, draping your ceiling across the dance floor, or maybe from corners of your ballroom. That's the added note that we're seeing with draping, where it's not just a functional purpose. You might not even need it, but it can be a great addition to layering in those design elements. It can really help transform a venue, especially if you're in like an industrial space or something that has more harsh vibes. It can really soften things up. Of course, if you're going more dramatic, it can be the opposite, and it can really make things feel like bold and bright in an otherwise pretty soft and boring ballroom. So instead of relying solely on florals for your design, you can use this fabric to help create visual warmth and intimacy in your room. Other examples could be creating an entrance to your ballroom, whether it's on the inside of the ballroom or the outside, that becomes a focal point of the space. Long gauzy runners that are hanging off of farm tables just to make it feel a little bit softer. Canopy draping again from the ceiling if your venue allows it. That can really soften things up or give you a more dramatic vibe. Wrapping or draping fabric over your ceremony arch can be a great way to bring this into your design, or even incorporating upholstered lounge seating in your color palette into like your cocktail area or off to the side of your dance floor. So again, the textiles and fabrics are no longer just the functional, let's hide what's behind the curtain at a wedding. It can really be part of those layers in your design story. And remember, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Most couples don't have the budget to do these crazy elaborate draping designs that you might see on Pinterest. But you can pick one or two areas even, whether it's the backdrop of your ceremony that then can be converted into your sweetheart table background, or the entrance to your reception that we talked about, maybe over the dance floor. Picking one or two of these areas to highlight with draping or fabric can really make the space feel totally different, and it can feel intentional without tripling your decor budget. However, do keep in mind that adding draping or fabric is going to be an investment. A lot of couples will think that they can just go and pick up something at like Joann's, RAP Joann's, pick something up at a fabric store pretty cheap and then have your friends hang it the morning of the wedding. And I will caution you that this is definitely something you want the professionals to handle, especially when we're looking at the inspiration pictures that we're seeing with this trend. To really build in these layers and make it look good, you need to have a professional bring the right equipment to make this look right. And many venues will also have restrictions for who can hang installations like this. So make sure to check with them first to see if they have any vendors that you are required to go with. So again, you don't just find the cheapest quote on the net and then find out that the venue doesn't allow them. The next trend is interactive guest experiences. This is another thing that we've seen creeping in a little bit, but couples are really putting more of an emphasis on the guest experience. And no, we're not just talking about like the photo booth with funny glasses or glow sticks on the dance floor, although again, those are still fun and great additions. We've been seeing those kind of come into the mix a little bit over the last couple of years, but now we're going even deeper. What do I mean by that? Let's talk custom games during cocktail hour. So you can create your own crossword puzzles or trivia game based on your history together or separately. Maybe you want to incorporate your families in the mix. This is going to date me a little bit, but my sister and I used to play Guess Who all the time. You know, that game where you each are given like a character and you have 30 in front of you and you have to guess who the other person's character is by eliminating different features. I don't know if that's making any sense, but I just saw this morning on TikTok that a couple put together a life-size personal game of Guess Who with their wedding guests. Now, this can get dangerous, of course, depending on how long the bar's been open. I can see this getting pretty ruthless with some of your guests. But how fun is that? And a great way to make your guests feel like they're really a part of the day. Now, I'm not saying you have to make a gigantic Guess Who board to make this trend work. Again, it can be as simple as trivia on cocktail napkins, so your guests can feel like they are interacting with the two of you, even if you're off taking pictures. Other examples of this: Polaroid guest books, but give them assignments. So have them almost go on a scavenger hunt of things for them to take pictures of. Maybe your favorite moments of a wedding day when you're a guest at another wedding, have your guests take pictures of those moments at your wedding. You're not going to see it all. You're not going to be able to be present for everything at your wedding. So put your guests to work in a fun way and have them capture those moments for you. Temporary tattoo stations are also a great way to have a little interactive fun with your guests. You can get them custom made, so it has either your monogram, your names, your pup's picture. I love that. And if you're super brave, I have even seen some real tattoo stations. Now, you will have to have the right guest group and dynamic to make that work. But for some couples, getting a real tattoo at the wedding or having your guests get a tattoo, again, for the right group of people, could be such an amazing story that they will literally never forget. They will always have the tattoo that they got at your wedding. Other fun ideas: bringing in live painters so the guests can see them painting a moment at the wedding, champagne towers that your guests can help with. That can be messy. Check with your venue, but an alternative could be mocktail bars, like build your own mocktail bars. So again, things that your guests can get involved in, or late night martini carts, or past late night snacks instead of just the traditional station that's set up in the back corner. These are all great ways to make it feel more interactive, but it doesn't have to necessarily break the budget or involve you creating a massive Guess Who board. Again, it's less about passive decor and more about giving your guests something fun and playful to do. These are the things that people are taking pictures of and you're going to see posted everywhere. These small touch points in between the bigger moments. These are the times that can spark connection and conversation between the guests who may not know each other. And it makes the wedding feel more like an experience than just an event. And the best part is they do not have to be over the top. Crossword puzzles you can create on Canva, print them out on your own, doesn't have to cost you a lot. You can even do something like a date night jar, trivia again during cocktail hour, or even something like a date ideas jar that they can put their suggestions for you guys in like a guest book area. And if you do the date idea, make sure that you take a picture of yourselves when you do that later on down the road and send that to the couple or tag them in socials when you're actually doing that date idea. The next trend is bringing more sculptural or futuristic designs into your floral structures. Flowers are getting weird, and I mean that in the very best way, because we're not just focused on the symmetrical, perfectly round centerpiece, unless, of course, that's what you want. But instead, we're seeing bold shapes, really unique, unexpected structures, whether it's for, again, that entrance, the backdrop of your ceremony. Think like 80s and 90s inspired extravagance, like huge bows and dynasty, but like make it modern. So floral structures as art, not just a functional centerpiece. And florists are loving this because it really allows them to get super creative and do something outside of that traditional compote vase on a table. Of course, this is fully going to depend on your venue and the space and what it does allow, but working with your design team to create one focal piece. Again, it does not have to be the entire room decked out in florals, but it can be one unique piece, whether it's on your head table, sweetheart table. The backdrop for your ceremony is a perfect spot. But creating some kind of structure or element that feels fully unique and fully you, but complements and works within the layers that we were discussing before. And for those who don't have the budget for a massive installation or something like that, which is most couples, we can bring this idea down to the bouquet level. We're changing things out and seeing a lot more cascades or sculptures as opposed to, again, that tight round bouquet. My planner warning though, of course, especially if you're thinking bigger as far as like a structure goes, make sure that you are working with the entire design team and your venue, of course, so that what you're doing is realistic. Especially if you are planning on repurposing something. A lot of times when we're talking about bringing in a larger focal point for the ceremony in particular, couples will want to repurpose that. And I love that. Anytime we can repurpose anything, I am all for it. Not only does it help the budget, but it's also less waste. You're not just throwing out a ton of floral after a 30-minute ceremony. The tricky part is the logistics. So if you do want to repurpose, make sure you're talking to the design team about how that's going to happen. Of course, every venue is going to be different in the ability for this to happen. Typically, larger structures, though, aren't easy to just move from the ceremony to behind the sweetheart table. Some of them are, though. So if that is an important feature, make sure that that's part of the design process so that it is easy for them to move the floral or whatever it might be from one place to the next. The next trend is using stationery as a part of this experience that we've been talking about. We talked about it a little bit with the stationery and the tabletop design, but we're seeing invitations and the whole design suite as more of an intentional experience rather than just an afterthought or a means for the invitation or a means for getting the guests the information. Yes, a lot of couples are still embracing the digital RSVPs. Thank goodness for that. It makes things so much easier, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to have that physical invitation. I think right now we have turned everything so digital. We're all so on and in our phones that having that connection and that touch point is really important, and it feels more special when it does come around, right? And for weddings, often the first experience is getting that save the date or getting the invitation. When was the last time you got a piece of mail that like you were excited about, right? It was probably an invitation to something. Again, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but we used to get excited about getting mail, right? And then there became a time where all we were getting was bills in the mail. And now we're not even getting bills in the mail because those are all coming online. So what do we get? Spam. All we get are like the coupons and those value packs and all of that. To get an actual physical invitation feels special. And again, that is often the first touch point that your guests have with your wedding. Now, just like all of these trends, this might not be for everyone. Some people aren't going to see a value or importance into stationery, but for some, it's going to be really important. And I think that really sets the tone for what your guests can expect, whether it's digital or a physical invitation. However you present the invitation to them shows them what to expect at the wedding. If you're wanting to incorporate all these fun, funky personal ideas, then make sure that you're showing a little bit of that in the invitation. As far as the trends go, though, we're really seeing couples embrace the invitations again and not have it be just an afterthought order from a template website. I love the template websites. They are perfect for couples that don't have that desire, but hiring a custom stationer that can create these designs for you is going to be what gives you that really showpiece of an invitation and stationery. We talked about it a little bit too, but don't forget that the stationery goes way beyond just the invitations. Make sure you're talking about programs, menu cards, place cards, signage, all of those pieces as those layers that we were talking about. Start those conversations while you're designing your invitations. You don't have to have them finalized at that point, but working the design into those pieces can really help create those layers. So when you're working with the florist and the other design team, you're able to let them know this is what we're doing for a menu card, what's going to coordinate with that. And again, remember, even if you're going fully digital, you can still use this as an opportunity to brand your materials and let your guests know what to expect from the wedding. So using consistent fonts and colors, if you're doing any monograms or other design elements across the invitations, incorporate those into the signage and everything that you'll have on the wedding day itself. Okay, moving on to the next trend, personalized keepsakes and wedding merch. Now, if you have heard me talk about wedding favors before, you know I am not a big fan. It's not that I don't like wedding favors. It's just that I know from experience that they always get left behind. Always. Always, always, always. We are picking up favors at the end of the night. The one exception to this rule is food-based favors. So even if one guest doesn't want their sugar cookie, someone else is going to grab it. Any other favors are always going to get left behind. So I typically advise my couples to either skip the favor, do something that's food-based, or better yet, put that money in their budget towards beefing up the dessert station, adding a late night snack in, something other than bottle openers, wine stoppers, or koozies. However, I do see that the world of merch is making its way into weddings. So I'm sure you have a favorite podcaster or influencer that has come out with a merch line. We all have the sweatshirt or something like that from, again, our favorite podcast. And we're seeing that kind of creep its way into weddings. Honestly, it's kind of like mitzvahs, where you see the 13-year-olds having sweatshirts and hats and all of that as giveaways on the dance floor. We're seeing that make its way a little bit into weddings. And I think that's going to be one of the trends we see more and more of over the next couple of years. So we're not talking about the same old generic favors, but instead we're seeing couples give guests personalized, meaningful gifts. Again, the definition of meaningful is going to be different for everybody, but think like personalized matchbooks. Those are certainly making a comeback. Embroidered tote bags. Or again, even that elevated merch line like hats, t-shirts, sweatshirts, or something that kind of fits in with your wedding vibe and all have your wedding logo. Again, not unlike an elevated mitzvah vibe. My one word of warning for this though is that you do not need to get one for every guest. Of course, depending on what the favor is, but if you are doing hats, bottle openers, things like that, I really recommend that you get one per household as opposed to one per guest, and have them placed on a favor table or given out by the DJ rather than having them at each place setting, which makes it tricky if you're not doing one per person. That will also help eliminate if people leave them behind. You're not wasting so much, but you still are giving them that favor and something for them to take home. And while we're talking about counts, I can promise you that you are about to order too many cocktail napkins. Without fail, we always have boxes left over at the end of the night. I think most places, ChatGPT included, will recommend like 3 or 4 per person. Way too many, way too many. 2 per person is good for ordering, and it will still give you plenty of keepsakes at the end of the event. If you do want to over order, keep your date off of them and you can just do your monogram so that you can use them for other events and it's not super obvious that these are your leftover cocktail napkins from your wedding when you're having a dinner party 3 years down the road. Okay, we're nearing the end. The next trend is elevated interactive food experiences. So we've talked a little bit about how we want to bring your guests into the mix and make them feel like they are having some role in your wedding. And we're also going to include that with food. When we're talking about interactive food, we're not just talking about that big charcuterie table, although that is part of it, doing custom grazing tables with a lot of local ingredients. But we're also going to see things that are more interactive in what guests are picking. So wood fire pizza that they can pick their toppings, taco bars with unique local sauces, live chef stations where guests can customize their pasta, or carving stations. Again, it's all about the experience and not just what's on the menu. So bringing in that interactive component can make a pizza or taco station feel elevated enough for your wedding. And one of my favorite trends from the aughts is coming back, and that is the candy station. When I tell you that when I was first starting this business, every wedding had a candy station and a chocolate fountain. I don't know if the chocolate fountains are ready to come back yet, but the candy stations are for sure coming back. The best thing is this can also serve as dessert and a favor for your guests, especially if you give them the little baggies so they can eat the candy on their way home. And to top that off, this also can incorporate into your design in layering the different colors. You need to be a little bit strategic if you want to do this to make sure your colors match your design palette, but you can certainly make sure that those baggies are something that either has your wedding logo or at least your colors on them. And for our final trend, we are going to talk about what we are seeing come into the mix with bridal fashion. And the good news is it is getting playful and fun again. We're seeing a lot of designers ditching the rules and leaning into fashion that has movement and transforms, maybe has multiple functions as well, and it can help tell a story. Here are some of the specific things that we're going to see in 2026 and 2027 for bridal fashion. First up is going to be the basque waistlines. So this is a vintage silhouette that has like a dipped corset style vibe, and it's showing up in a lot of modern gowns that have like a sleeker fabric to them, but also have the structuring or the boning that come with a more contemporary neckline. So it's a way to combine a couple different fashion vibes. It's a very soft and romantic look. Think like princess in a castle vibes. And it gives you like a chic nod to the past without feeling too costumey. The next trend in fashion we're seeing is dress codes for your guests, but instead of just formal, semi-formal cocktail attire, couples are getting a little bit more creative with how they're describing it. So again, instead of just the stuffy black tie cocktail hour, saying something like garden party chic or champagne and black tie, monochromatic black and white. Use some of the words that you're describing your layered color palette or your layered design and encourage your guests to dress in those palettes as well. Word of caution here though, be realistic with your guests and your expectations. You will likely have some guests that fully embrace a unique dress code, but you'll also likely have some guests that either don't want to or can't afford to buy something new just for the wedding. So you have to keep your expectations realistic. If you have a fully fashion forward guest list, perfect, fantastic, great. If your guests are not that fashion forward, again, just keep your expectations for what this might look like real so that you're not disappointed on your wedding day if the majority of the guests don't cooperate with what you had visioned. Next up in fashion, we're seeing more convertible bridal looks. So we've been seeing a lot of the accessories like the gloves, the capes, things like that. And now we're seeing that transition and be even more dramatic so that it can take your one look from the ceremony to a completely different dance floor ready reception look. This can help make that one gown what you wear all night rather than having to have a change of clothes to be able to be comfortable while dancing. And the statement accessories are definitely not going anywhere. So we're still going to see the dramatic veils, pearl gloves, oversized, maybe detachable bows, and even bridal hats that are taking a center stage here in fashion. These pieces can really add personality, especially if you choose a more simplistic design for your gown. but they can also make for great photos. So even if you don't plan on wearing gloves on the wedding day or that bridal hat, maybe you're getting married in the winter in Michigan, you want to have a shrug, something like that. Even if it's just for the photo moments, think about those accessories that you can bring with you to really change up your look. And there you have it. Those are the trends that I think we're going to see shape 2026 and 2027 weddings. The common thread, expression, and experience. Couples want their weddings to feel like them, personal, playful, and a little less traditional. And if you're planning your wedding and you are feeling unsure about how to bring all of this together, that is exactly what I'm here to help you with in the Planning Collective membership. Not only do you have the one-on-one support, but you also have templates, checklists, and guides to help you plan confidently without getting lost in all of these trends. You can learn more over at planningcollective.com/membership or find me on Instagram at Planning Collectively. I would love to hear which trends you are most excited about trying and which ones you are fine with leaving in the past. And if this episode gave you even one helpful idea, I would love for you to take a quick second to rate, review, and subscribe. It would really help other couples find this podcast and plan their wedding with a little less stress and more fun. Thank you so much for hanging with me today, and I will see you in the next episode.